Hello, so this is Skelegun here. I'm doing something a bit different today. I'm going to be reviewing the movie The Lawnmower Man, the 1992 science fiction action horror film directed by Brett Leonard, starring Pierce Brosnan, I don't know how you say that, and Austin O'Brien. Uh, I haven't seen this movie in a very long time, and I'm entirely winging this. Now, I'm going to do this in a sort of format where basically I'm going to tell you what I remember about the movie because I haven't seen it in a long time, and then after I watch the movie, I'm going to talk about it and review it in a sort of what I watched, what I expected I was going to see, and then what I actually saw, like sort of like that meme format. Anyways, so I haven't seen this movie in a very long time. I saw this movie when I was a kid at my dad's house a lot. This in like Monster Squad and what was the other movie that I used to watch there a lot that I really shouldn't have? Oh, RoboCop. Anyways, so I haven't seen it in a long time. Movie kind of faded from my memory. I just kind of vaguely remember the title. Now, the reason why I decided to watch this movie again is because I was watching the television series for Waco, the Waco miniseries, and they had a scene where David Koresh referenced the movie, and I guess he did that in real life as well. And they show a clip of it, and I thought, wow, that looks really garbage. So I decided I'd rewatch it and see if my childhood was ruined. Well, actually, I know it was ruined, but see how messed up my childhood was. So, yeah, I haven't watched it yet. I just got it in the mail finally. About what I predict. What I'm predicting is that this is gonna be like, well, from what I remember about the movie, it's like got religious overtones, and it's kind of a sort of Flowers for Algernon type story, and it's also got really spectacular 90s CG graphics. So what I'm expecting is it's going to be very too deep for me, too deep for you. It's going to be full of really just sort of dumb, gaudy, sort of Gnostic symbolism, and I bet I'm going to have a great time. If not, I'll just be really bored. Hopefully, I won't be bored. But yeah, that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting some really good special effects, and I'm expecting some really ridiculous pretentiousness. And for the record, I am going to be watching the Blu-ray special edition. I'm going to be watching the director's cut, which who knows what that even means nowadays. Director's cuts are like kind of a joke. But anyways, let's take a look and see what we got. Hello, welcome back. So I just finished watching the Lawnmower Man Special Edition, director's cut, and looking at the back of the case, the director's cut version is 141 minutes as opposed to the theatrical cut, which was 108 minutes. Quite a substantial increase in length. Now, so I don't want to do a scene-by-scene review of the movie. I don't feel that is necessary. What I will also, before I get into the movie itself, though, I do want to expand a little bit on what I thought I was going to be getting into versus what I actually got into. So going into this, I kind of had this presupposition that it was going to be kind of like Evangelion tier, too deep for you sort of vibe. What instead it's not the most original story, but it's still enjoyable. It's if you've seen Flowers for Algernon, you know the first half of the story basically. And for those of you who haven't read Flowers for Algernon or seen the really bad movie that was made about it in the 60s, basically Flowers for Algernon was a story about it's a science lab where they're experimenting on this mouse, and they give it a formula that causes it to become super intelligent. and then they decide to test, because it's such a success, they decide to test it on a human patient. They test it on the janitor at the lab, who is a simple-minded, um, mentally handicapped person, adult, and the formula is a complete success. It causes his IQ to skyrocket. He becomes a super successful scientist almost overnight. The problem is, I think it was maybe like a year later, the mouse Algernon's brain suddenly starts like deteriorating rapidly, and then the scientist, the janitor turned scientist man, is now faced with the dilemma that he too is going to undergo the same process, where his brain is going to uh, revert to the state it was in before and actually deteriorate even further very rapidly, and he's going to soon die of basically like accelerated Alzheimer's in a way. This is the first. So basically, the first half of this movie kind of follows that same formula, but instead of a mouse, it is a chimp, and instead of the formula causing permanent brain damage and leading to a death, what happens is there's a military application that's being tested for this brain-enhancing virtual reality simulation device, if you will. And the lead scientist in the project in this case is played by Pierce Bozeman. I always have trouble with his name. I don't really. It's a joke that's funny to myself, but to probably no one else. Anyways, so Pierce Brosnan, he is upset that his prize monkey, has just been killed by guards because the monkey went on a homicidal rampage. You see, he never intended for this to be a military project. He just wanted to develop a VR headset. Basically, he wanted to build an Oculus Rift in the 90s, and he wanted to teach kids how to do math or something. I don't know. He was, good guy scientist working for evil military industrial complex. You know the story. You've heard it all before. And so, enter the simpleton, Job, who is the groundskeeper for the local church. And Job is known as the Lawnmower Man because he mows everyone's lawns, because he's just such a nice guy, and that's what he does. And so you have Job the Lawnmower Man, and Pierce Brosnan decides to take him under his wing and do the brain-enhancing VR experiments in the privacy of his own home, away from the laboratory setting. But they soon run into a situation where they basically hit the wall with progress, so Pierce Brosnan decides to convince his boss at work to let him do the experiments using the lab technology so they can get better results. Seeing the possibility for profit on this, of course, because it's evil U.S. military-industrial complex, his boss basically sabotages the program and switches the formulas back to the chimp rage-inducing psychomedicines. What this leads to is where it begins to diverge from the formula laid out in Flowers for Algernon. Basically what you have instead is that his powers keep growing, and Job turns from this like gentle, simple-minded janitor / groundskeeper guy into a genius who is able to read entire books. It's mentioned that it's mentioned that he learns the entire language of Latin in 2 hours. He becomes superhumanly intelligent, and he notices he starts being able to read minds. That's the first breakthrough he has, and it kind of accelerates from there to the point where he's actually able to manipulate people's minds and cause pyrokinesis and telekinesis. And sort of the climax of the film is, towards the climax of the film, Pierce Brosnan's character gets taken away, called to the headquarters for the company to report on his findings. And while he's away, Job decides that he needs to mega dose on the formula to on the VR formula. So it's kind of vaguely explain the interaction, but basically it's a combination of VR and nootropic drugs. So he decides to mega dose on like the psycho chimp monkey brain acid, and it causes him to like believe he is Cyber Jesus. And that's an actual quote from the movie. He calls himself Cyber Jesus, and his goal is from then to ascend and take over all of technology and become some sort of VR god. And yeah, so that's basically the plot of the movie. One thing that's worth mentioning is that, this movie came out in, what was it, 1993, I believe? And it very strongly features VR. VR is central to the plot. And as you can imagine, VR and CGI in 1993 were not the best. I mean, this is some really... If you've ever... Most of you people listening to this are probably, like, not even born in the 90s. Unfortunately, I'm old. But, so... I'm sure this movie looked really good when it came out. I'm sure this was, like, cutting-edge technology. But now it's an acquired taste. Some parts just look really, really goofy when you can tell that they were trying to go for something like amazing, spectacular. Basically, those like cheesy math book covers with like the glowing brains and like the floating like shapes and everything. That's kind of what a lot of the CG in this looks like, but really low res, like low polygon, I should say. Because that's what they had at the time. That's the best they could do. It's very dated, this movie. It's very much a product of the 90s. But in a way, it's also kind of futuristic because VR is finally starting to become a thing. Whereas in the 80s and 90s and even the 2000s, it was just kind of like something that people dreamt about, and you would talk about it, but you always in the back of your mind, you're like, hey, that's like flying cars. It's not really going to happen anytime soon. But now we're finally starting to get it done, which is a nice change pace. But anyways, so back to The Lawnmower Man. The Lawnmower Man is... it's a weird movie. If you like movies where there's lots of, like, symbolism on screen that doesn't mean anything, if you like movies with 90s CG, if you like movies with VR vor, there's a vor scene, and it's... I'm not going to explain the context of that. You have to see it for yourself. I feel it's the best way. Otherwise, it's not as funny. Anywho, so yeah, there's a CG vor from the 90s, which is cool. No, it's not. I didn't get around to watching any of the special features because, like I said, it was 141 minutes, the director's cut, and it's getting late. So I might check those out later. But yeah, so if you like... basically, if you're like me and you like Videodrome, or movies like Videodrome, where the central theme is like the military-industrial complex creates a technology that ends up blending sort of mysticism and technology and science, and ends up creating basically something that has more meaning than this mere materialistic weapon, and that ends up ultimately ends up backfiring on them as a result. You'll like this movie. I mean, that's kind of my jam. And the ending is pretty bonkers. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it involves, him ascending to cyber godhood, which sounds pretty dope, and it is. Which, yeah, so this is my first time recording this, so this is going to be really rough, and I'm hoping that I can keep doing this. I'm going to try to, every time well, not every time, but I'm going to, maybe at least once a week, try to do a recording, and hopefully I'll take notes next time. That way I have more to say. And also, maybe get some guests in the future. That would be cool. And then we could just talk about movies or books that we like, and I think that'll be a lot of fun. I don't know, or maybe you just won't listen to this because I don't think anyone will. But if you do, then good for you. You're a fine specimen of human being. So that's about all. Bye.